Hey guys, and welcome back into the den for a new style of episode, as I've been loving experimenting over the past few weeks with new styles to seeing what works and what doesn't. These past few weeks have been the busiest I've ever been, applying for universities, apprenticeships, attending interviews up and down the country, keeping up with schoolwork, free NEAs, and balancing 2 jobs on top of this. So I thought, to take our minds off the manic and hectic lives we all live, I would sit down and do a nice, cute, one-to-one, intimate little style of episode where we ask, what if? To make us wonder why things happen and appreciate what we actually have. For me, I believe living in my generation comes with an absolute abundance of expectations we feel we must obey daily and fear the consequences of breaking away from this, whether this be what we should wear, how we should talk or act, or how teenagers are perceived as being rude and lazy. So this made me think, what if we didn't live under these expectations? What then? For me, I believe the beauty of individuality would finally blossom once for all, and people wouldn't feel uncomfortable being obliged to live under somebody else's idea of perfection. I would experiment more with what I wore, and even though I say I don't live under these expectations myself, I think we all actually unconsciously do, no matter what we live in, what age we are or anything. There still is that little hidden unconscious fear of breaking away from the norm and being seen as different from the crowd. But I think moving into the new year, which is coming up faster than we think, I want to not be essentially a sheep or part of the herd. Just be who I am more. And I think sixth form's definitely, it makes you feel like who you are. Because obviously when you're in high school, you pick your GCSEs, so it narrows it down. And then you go and pick your A-levels, which narrows it down even further. So I think the movement onto university and becoming an adult, becoming 18 and moving on, it just is slowly the journey of discovering who you are and what makes you, you. And if we no longer live under these expectations, then becoming and finding who we truly are will become just even easier for everyone. In year 13 has really made me realise how quickly time does fly by, and my days of reception Christmas parties and bike days feel like a lifetime ago, but at the same time, literally only feels like yesterday. The thought this time next year, I could be living hours away from my family, my best friend could be the other side of the country, fills me with a mixture of anxiety and excitement, because the thought of university I've been set on from such a young age. Depending on how I wanted or what I wanted to do as a job, I still was set on the thought of university, moving away, that individuality and freedom you get of living on your own for the first time. And it's always excited me, and I've always been passionate and just looking forward to that next stage of my life. But at the same time, it does fill me with this certain fear of anxiety and just worry that you're not under this little home anymore. You are out in the real world, and I think that's what scares me the most. That I always used to sit there in year 7 or 8 and think, I've got ages left, I've got years, there's no need to worry about university, that's something to be excited for. And now that I'm sitting like nearly halfway through year 13, you actually just take a step back and realise this time next year could be completely different. And it just makes you appreciate each school day and everything even more. And the thought we're going into 2023 in just over a month is absolutely frightening, at the thought that 2023 is what you're putting on your applications for universities. And initially that used to be like, it's ages away. And now it's actually creeped up on all of us. It's the thought of, we will have to face the real world and it will happen. And for me, I've always, like I said, always been set on the idea of university, but now I've been experimenting with apprenticeships and just finding other ways to gain experience and qualifications. It's become exciting. Like last week, I attended an interview at Salford University, and it was my first time actually looking around a campus of a university, which was amazing and just completely eye-opening to see the range and diversity of the facilities and everything we have available in order for you to gain your best experience and become the best qualified in that profession you want to be. And it truly made me realise that this decision is so important and significant. Like the amount of thought that you have to put into this is phenomenal, because it will literally determine the rest of your life. And I do believe that time does go by in an instant, and it does go by in a blink of an eye. And it's made me, like I said, value every second, especially with those around me, my mum, and my sister. It's made me value that time even more, the thought that could become such less frequent next year. And it just makes me, like, little things now, even putting the tree up this year, we did put it up before December, but I have to admit, a couple of years ago we put it up mid-November, so end of November time is good for us, actually. And no longer will I wish the time away ever again. The days where I used to be like, I wish it was next week, wish it was next month, never again. Each day for me now is important, because I've realised how quickly time does actually go. And I think for me, the COVID pandemic really made me the importance of treasuring moments with those around you. Being stuck in the same four walls of my room, glued to my laptop and my desk, doing hours of lifeless online school, moving occasionally every now and then to walk a few steps, downstairs to the bathroom, to the kitchen, into the garden, back again, just following that same monotonous routine. Life became like monotone, and it just made me feel like I was like an animal stuck in a zoo, mindlessly walking in circles, just begging for any taste or glimpse of freedom. And it's made me think, what if COVID didn't happen? And the thought of that is absolutely like astounding, because I remember when it first came around, I was sat in my high school before form time, and someone came up to me with a newspaper article and said, "Oh, have you seen this about China, this pandemic and stuff?" And I'm not even going to lie, I did completely brush it off and go, absolute nonsense, nothing to worry about, we'll be fine, it's in China, there's nothing to worry about. And a lot of my friends thought that too. When that person came in and said about it, we were all like, what are you on about? It's nothing to worry about. Like, it doesn't matter. These things happen all the time across the world, and we won't get affected. And then 3 weeks later, I'm sat at my desk doing online learning, and we get the announcement. I remember vividly sitting in my living room downstairs with my family, and the announcement comes of GCSEs being cancelled. And at first, my sister's like, "Oh my God, you're so lucky, no exams." My friends are like celebrating. And I'm sat there going, have I done enough to prove myself for these exams? Like, because obviously they were all based on teachers' predictions and your old mocks. And it made me realise, have I done enough in my previous exams? Is there enough to prove my potential? Like, I wanted to improve, I wanted to keep doing better, but is that going to be able to be shown? And I think it's just made me realise, like, I spent so much time with the same people that when we eventually came out of lockdown and we could start to see more people, being able to become face-to-face with people again was valued so much more. Like, for me, my first concert back after lockdown was absolutely amazing. The thought of being and hearing and experiencing the memories of live music again is something I will never forget. And it's made me value each concert even more. And like giving my friends a hug again, being able to laugh, go out for coffee with them, just for little things you value even more. Like, even being able to, like before, stuck going on a walk with only yourself. And I did value these walks at first. I'd put my music in and it's just time with yourself. But at times, especially in the pandemic, you had too much time with yourself and too much time with your own thoughts, which in a moderation can be good, because you then learn to value what you need to prioritise, what you need to just forget about. But other times it can become overwhelming, and becoming alone with your own thoughts can be damaging, because you can lead to overthinking, which I will admit will do too often. And being able to just go out and go for a walk with somebody else, even if you had to be 2 meters away from them, it still gave you that sense of interaction where you could talk to someone else and actually get a response, instead of hearing nothing back except your own thoughts, which at times became a very lonely place for some people. And it did for me too. And I think since the COVID pandemic, like all these big events which have happened soon, like the Qatar World Cup, which is going on now, people need to appreciate that we can do this now again. And like Christmases, back together with families, not having to worry about your bubbles and everything. It just isn't completely mind-blowing that I have lived through a pandemic which has completely altered the face of the universe. Like still, I have a job at my local care home and I still have to wear face masks, and people, it's like contention around whether you got a vaccine. Did you get vaccinated or not? Again, it shifted people's societal view on you and whether you were seen as getting the vaccine and you were an outcast and you didn't want to go back to normality. And it's like it completely halted the globe entirely. People couldn't travel. The exchange of ideas was stopped. Businesses completely changed. And it has completely altered technology at all. So like one of my university interviews was online and that was completely normal. And one of my work experience placements I'll be doing soon is going to be all online. And people find that the norm now. Like we have shifted towards Teams, Google Meet, everything, because we know how to adapt to the new digital world, which I think is especially prominent in journalism. The shift away from the written world to the digital world is so important to recognise it. But I also think that it's just completely altered our mindset as well of, yes, little things may seem small now, entirely turned upside down, and nobody could imagine what was going to happen next. We didn't know what we were going to see when we turned the telly on. And I also think that's been very significant to how people have now got essentially a fear of the news, and they're scared of turning on to see what could come next. And I think COVID very significantly influenced this, because people turned the telly on, saw the figures of the deaths and the infection rates and further restrictions, and they became tougher. So people began to fear what was going to happen next. And now that we're gaining this freedom back, people still live with that fear of the news, which I want to shift. The news should become a place of empowerment and change and motivation and education, and it shouldn't be feared because it is a powerful tool for the future. And COVID has made us find who we truly are, and it did come with good times, and many times I've had my own little concerts in my room, but it was great difficulty for others, and I'm not afraid to admit that spending time alone with myself was challenging, and I wanted to escape my thoughts many of times. And even though I despised COVID when I was stuck in the same four walls of my bedroom, I believe without it, finding who I am and who I would have become later has made us as a population more aware of who we are and what we can do together, and the power of solidarity was truly shown. I always think that everything does happen for a reason, and history should never be rewritten, as one small change could completely alter the future forever. And as we know, history fascinates me. Taking it as an A-level has completely expanded my knowledge and curiosity to just continue to explore it. And because if we don't know what came before us, we'll never know why certain aspects of our lives exist and how we can adapt and shift for the future. And everyone has their favourite part of history, which says a lot about them. So what if you could go back in history and witness an event or period? For me, taking A-level history has made me become fascinated by the African American civil rights movements which occurred in the 1900s, and being able to witness events such as Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, the sit-ins on the buses with Rosa Parks, and the actions of the NAACP, which was the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People. I think it'd be fascinating because their work essentially paved the way and was the catalyst for further change for ending racism and ending segregation, the Jim Crow laws. It was absolutely monumental with events such as the Little Rock Nine, and people still continue this today. It's inspiring and showing the power of speaking up for what we want to believe in to make a change for the better. And without their actions, the lives of African Americans would be entirely different, and the dream for equality would be even further out of reach. We may not have reached it today, but people still continue to contribute to the previous efforts they made, such as the recent Black Lives Matter movement shows that people are still motivated because of what people have done in the past. They want to continue this effort and they want it to be monumental forever. It's the same with the feminism movement. We haven't just had one wave of the suffragettes and that's it. People have continued to have different waves of feminism emerging, and it adapts to the society we're around, whether that be around abortion rights in the Roe versus Wade case, or whether that be economic equality for women and the recent feminism of breaking down the stereotype that it isn't wanting the superiority of women, it's wanting the equality of both sexes. And that's what I think is so monumental about history, and especially I'm fascinated by movements such as the African American civil rights and feminism, because they have completely altered mindsets and attitudes globally across the world. And without these movements, we would have no role models for inspiration. They paved the way for equality and catalysed the drive for more people to want to make a change. However, I do believe living in this generation sometimes makes us too tough on ourselves. The fear of having to fit in and be accepted. And even though in a moment it feels good that you're not the outcast, looking back, sometimes I wish I just wore that top or went to that club and didn't care what people would say as a result of it. And this got me thinking, what if you could sit down with your younger self? What would you say to them? What would I say if I sat down with younger Sophie and had a little conversation? For me, I think I could spend hours with her. And it sounds weird saying her as in the third person when it's actually me, but just in a past self. So much has happened, and I don't think they would actually believe me if I told them everything that's happened. Even in this year, like setting up a podcast, passing my driving test, going on the radio multiple times and getting offers from dream unis. Even in 1 year, so much has happened. So telling her about my nearly 18 years would be definitely eventful. But to start, I would just say, just don't be so hard on yourself. It will work out, and you just don't need to stress. Don't change for anyone, especially, and you are doing well. No matter how much your mind will say you're not, you are doing well, and it will be okay. My goals and ambitions have changed countless times over my life, from being a vet, a scientist, to the current journalist. I really have wanted to be everything under the sun. The thought of turning 18 feels unbelievable, and I'm definitely not ready to adult yet. But all I know is, if I could talk to my younger self, I would tell her, do not wish and waste the time away, appreciate every moment, and just give her trust that I am doing well. And I think this year has truly made me begin to start my why not era. Why not ask someone? If they say no, then I'll try again next time. If you never ask, you never know, and it's opened so many doors for me. I'm not going to say I regret anything or want to change it, as I do believe, like I said, it happens for a reason. I just needed to begin that journey of believing in myself more sooner. And I will admit, I'm still not here now, but it's a path and I'm on the way. So if I sat down with young Sophie, I don't think she'd still believe if I now say I love coffee. She definitely wouldn't believe me, but it would be an interesting conversation. But all I'd say to her is, just have more hope in yourself. And that will continue throughout my life. And people may tell me that now, but if you sit down, just be like, everything will be okay. And it sounds such a cliche, but it does happen for a reason. But the most important thing is just do not waste your time away and value the people you have around you. And even though sometimes may be difficult and you feel like you just want to give up, keep pushing through. Put your favourite music on, listen to anything, put the cringiest film on, anything you can do, which you know will work, just do it and you will get through and it will be okay. So, now to end it with a funny what if. What if your life was a movie? What genre would it be? And who would you cast as yourself and your main characters? Anyone that knows me knows that I am not afraid to admit, and it isn't a guilty pleasure for me. It's just my absolute favourite is a good old rom-com from the 80s and 90s. And what movie is most like your life? For me, a cheesy rom-com, like I said. I'd like to call myself a mini Bridget Jones, to be honest, as it's my ultimate comfort movie. I want to be a journalist just like her, and my clumsiness is always making me feel embarrassed and getting me into worse situations. I'd love to say that my life is like a Boss Girl movie 24/7, but it really isn't. I am a Bridget Jones inside and out, and I always will be. I'm proud to admit it. I've got my Shazza, my Tom and my Jude beside me, looking for my Mark Darcy and falling for Daniel Cleaver. And if anyone gets those Bridget Jones references, I will be so happy, because they are my ultimate movies. And when someone says they actually like them, absolute peak. It's my absolute favourite movie, and even though it's from years ago and I wasn't even born when they were around, I will still continue to them to be my favourite. The Bridget Jones series, Breakfast Club. I recently watched Pretty in Pink, which is again another 80s movie, but they are my ultimate go-to. Like, even when it's coming up to Christmas now, Home Alone. Only watch the first two though, because they're the classics. You can't watch the rest of them. I will live that I was meant to be born in the 80s and 90s, and that's what it always will be. And if anyone asks me what film character I am Bridget Jones, and that's the end of. Simple. So thanks again for tuning in to another episode of The Lion's Den. It may be a bit more quiet this week with it just being me, but it's a nice light-hearted episode where we realise the importance of living in a moment and just escaping the stress of year 13 for a while, because if anyone mentions an NEA to me again, I think I might cry. Just appreciate the moment and living in it, and join me next time when I'll be joined again with Lana and Elle as we discuss 2022 as a year, and maybe even think about what on earth 2023 could bring, the good, the bad, and the completely unpredictable.